Okay, so we're going live right now, and I'm seeing that the attendees are starting to come in. So I'm going to give this I'm going to give it about 30 seconds and say hello to everybody who's joining us out there. And just an FYI, one of our panelists is having a little bit of Wi-Fi problems right now joining, so hopefully we'll get him up in place as well.
It's funny, it was working for him outside and now it's not working inside.
Now, so in our practice session, but all things being equal, that's kind of the way it goes. So
I'm going to turn on my light on. Sorry, go ahead.
Everybody coming in. I know we had quite a number of people registered for today, so we're very excited. We're very excited you all come in and join us. And so I will say good evening and welcome to the second of our Zoom talks with local farmers and producers, and the first Zoom talk under what we call our Long Island Grown banner. So today's program features three dynamic from Quail Hill Farm, Ira Haspel from KK's The Farm, Greg Kessler from the Hoppy Acre Farm and Springs Fireplace Hotsauce, and Charity Joy Robinson from Kombat-Cha. And Laura Donnelly joins us again as the moderator for our Long Island Grown series, which we've been hosting at the Trust Bridge Gardens for over 7 years. So thank you, Layton. Ira is going to be joining us shortly. Greg, Charity, and Laura for taking the time to join us and for the wonderful work you are doing to help feed and nourish our communities. I'm Yvette DeBeau Salcedo with the Peconic Land Trust, and I'll be the host for today's panel, helping to facilitate the technology. So fingers crossed everything goes well and we're able to get Ira on with us in just a few minutes. And as we move our series from what was always at Bridge Gardens to now Zoom. So we're glad that so many people are joining us this evening and many who are returning for the second week in a row. So thank you, thank you. And I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe and healthy. And from all of us at the Trust, we wish you the best and are grateful that you are choosing to spend a little time with us this evening. And I want to give a shout out to Kathy Kennedy, our Senior Manager of Outreach, who has worked with Laura and our Bridge Gardens Director, Rick Bogish, to build these panels over so many seasons. On a housekeeping note, you were muted during the conversation, but at the end will be questions from the audience. Oh, and I guess that's Laura's puppy who's making his appearance. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to post a question, and we'll try to answer as many of these as we can at the end of Laura's program. And I'm just going to give a little bit on the Peconic Land Trust and Bridge Gardens. So as you may know, the Trust was founded in 1983 with a mission to conserve Long Island's working farms, natural lands, and heritage. And with your help and the support of thousands of community groups and all levels of government, we've been able to accomplish a lot. We've protected over 13,000 acres of land, including over 6,000 acres of farmland that is available to farmers growing food and many other agricultural products. Last week during our conversation, I spoke about the importance of local farms, and we'll hear more about that tonight. But tonight, I'd also like to shine a brief spotlight on Bridge Gardens, which is where we usually host Long Island Grown. Donated to the Trust in 2008 by Harry Nyans and Jim Kilpatrick, Bridge Gardens is a 5-acre public garden in the heart of Bridgehampton. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit, we hope that you will stop by soon. The gardens are open every day from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And for 12 years, Rick has worked to both respect the legacy of the gardens created by Jim and Harry, as well as to bring the gardens forward. And in 2012, we adopted a formal mission for the gardens to serve as a multi-purpose, multidisciplinary outdoor classroom, demonstration garden, and community resource with a focus on sustainable growing practices. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator and friend of the gardens with a big thank you to her, Laura Donnelly. Laura is a local
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you. And thank you to all of you for joining us. I know these are kind of strange circumstances, and normally it would be a lot of fun at Bridge Gardens and we would have delicious food after the event, maybe something from Quail Hill, from Layton, some of Charity's Kombat-Cha, Greg some hot sauce, Ira maybe something from KK's farm. Anyway, but we're going to make it good anyway. And what I'd like to do first is just ask each of you just a brief introduction by yourselves. And the way I see you in the little boxes, I'm going to pretend you're sitting next to me on stools. So, and then kind of brief, because we have a big audience tonight, so I'd like a chance for the audience to ask some questions. So I'd like to start to my right with Greg, then Layton, then Charity, and Ira, if he gets back to us. Just kind of tell us what you do and how you got out here to do what you're doing. Greg Kessler.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Kessler. Thank you, Yvette and Peconic Land Trust for asking me to be on this panel, and Laura for moderating us, keeping us in line. So I am a farmer here on the East End. I've been out here all my life, sort of as a weekender. My parents have been here since the late 60s, and I had no choice but to follow them. I started farming in 2011 as sort of a glorified apprentice or glorified volunteer at Quail Hill. And in 2017, I started the Hoppy Acre, which is in Amagansett, New York. And we are a value-added farm growing hops for beer, hot peppers for hot sauce and salsa, and now indigo for natural dyeing. How did I get into it? I started composting. I found Scott Chasky. When I was a little kid, we always used to drive by Quail Hill Farm, and I wanted to stop, and my mother wouldn't let me. I got old enough to stop my own car. I asked Scott Chasky if I could compost at Quail Hill, and he said yes. And I started composting, and the farm manager at the time was pregnant. And I said, "Hey, you're pregnant. You shouldn't be working so hard. Do you want some help?" And her eyes just sort of opened up and said, "Sure." I just said, "When do you start?" And then she said 8 o'clock, and I was there the next day at 8 o'clock. And that's how I sort of got into farming. Did that answer your question?
Excellent. Yes, thank you. Layton.
So I think I'm going to take your question, Laura, and to the top, if that's okay.
Okay. Okay.
So I grew up in Pelham, New York, which is people watching might be familiar with the taking of Pelham 123, which is basically the claim to fame for Pelham, which is a sleepy bedroom community north of New York City, not known for its farmland. I started farming in 2006, 2007 when I was in college. I had the good fortune of going to Mount Holyoke College in Western, which is an area of really this like panoply of amazing organic vegetable farms, and was really taken with the work as a young person, 18, 19 years old. I was lucky enough to just like jump into the wave of organic, and it was really sort of seeing this resurgence in Southern New England and in the Northeast, and started working at a pretty large scale organic CSA that was serving Boston mostly, so 1,200 CSA members on about 80 acres at the time. After a few years of that, got kind of burned out agriculture, and I looked west, and I ended up at the UC Santa Cruz Farm and Garden Apprenticeship at CASFIS, at the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems, which taught me really the ecological underpinnings of the work, and also ignited this passion in me for teaching. And so I really missed the East Coast, and I moved back east in the autumn of 2012, and was going around the Northeast interviewing for jobs, and that's when I met Scott Chasky. I was actually at the time interviewing for a job at Sylvester at the same time, Quail Hill Farm was looking for a new farm manager, and the rest is history. So I started at Quail Hill in the, I guess, late winter, so January of 2013, and was a farm manager there for 6.5, 7 years. And now this is season 8 for me, and now I'm the director of Quail Hill. So lucky to be here, and thanks to Yvette and Kathy and Laura for hosting tonight.
Thank you. Charity?
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Peconic Land Trust, and Yvette, and Laura, and Kathy for having me on here. So I'm actually pretty new to the East End. I moved out here about 4.5 years ago, and previous to that, I traveled the world for about 15 years. My background is more in body movement and dance and yoga, fitness. And I came here kind of on a whim. I came to the first yoga festival they had at Hayground Festival and just kind of wanted to check things out. And I fell in love with the nature here. It was September, it was beautiful. And I said, I'm just gonna see what happens. And rewind about 7 years when I was living in the Caribbean, I started making kombucha. And the reason I started making it was I didn't like what was out on the market. I didn't like the vinegary taste of kombucha, but I knew the benefits of it. So I started brewing in a little island, just part of the Grenadines, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, called Mystique. And I had minor explosions as I was experimenting because it's very hot down there. But eventually I kept going with it. And when I moved here, people would try it and they said, you know, you should really think about marketing this. And I said, oh, I don't know. Then it's going to be a business and it's not really my thing. I'm more into movement and helping people right in front of them rather than having this product. So, but I took the plunge last year. I launched Kombat-Cha. I was one of the winners of the Riptide competition that was held at Southampton Arts Center in November. And I just keep moving forward with it. I have 3 flavors and I'm hoping to see what happens this season with a little uncertainty out there, but I'm looking forward to having more people try it, and I'm excited to kind of be the person behind it. I've just brought on an assistant to help me with more marketing and sales and e-commerce. So we'll see how that flows. And I brew at the East End Food Institute in Southampton on the college there. So it's an incubator for startup food producers. So I've been able to meet a lot of different people there and to get ideas of how to grow the business and everything. So it's been fun. It's been challenging, but fun at the same time. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Charity. You know, it's kind of amazing. We're going to try to get to Ira if we can get him in here. I just can see that he's trying. But it's interesting, the Amagansett Food Institute has the incubator there over at Stony Brook. They have really helped an amazing number of people. Carissa of Carissa's Bakery started there. Jack Formica has been the chef there. There's so many things that have happened there that have been successful. So Charity, I think you're in the right place. So I guess Ira's not quite back. So I'd like to go back to Greg and ask, you have worked in fashion photography. And when I spoke with you before, you said something about leaving fashion photography and going to farming is kind of like going from intangible goods to tangible goods. Could you tell us about that? What you mean by that?
Well, I think they're both tangible goods, but I think there's, well, it's a tough question. I may have been misquoted. They're both very tangible, but you know, photography is more of a spirit and a feeling and an image that, whereas farming, it's a bit more slower and time intensive, so the development is a little bit longer. You know, there's fashion itself you can hold, your clothing, your glasses, your bottle of perfume, and you can hold a hot sauce bottle or what have you. So they're tangible in that same way as you can hold it. But I think, wow, I can't remember that quote. I have to think about that
It was
one.
really good. I really liked it. That's
Maybe there's
okay.
another question. I don't want to talk about fashion. I think we're really here about the products that we can make out here and the goods that we can make in Long Island. The soil is so great, and you can really, the quality of food that's coming out of this part of the world is really incredible. So I'm very fortunate to have found this piece of land with Scott Chasky that really can help us produce a really quality product. I mean, that's sort of the beauty of what we're doing. It's, you know, we're growing hot peppers that are really meant for another region. And because the soil is so great, Zone 7, I mean, the soil has nothing to do with Zone 7, but the weather and the soil conditions really help us grow a really fantastic raw material that can give us a great product.
Excellent. So,
and that is very
thank you. Layton, you majored in critical social thought at Mount Holyoke. And I remember there was an excellent article in East Magazine about you. And you said that it was great training to be a farmer in that it's interdisciplinary. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah,
because I don't know
totally.
what critical social thought is.
Well, I would firstly like to lament the fact that critical social thought, CST, is now a defunct major at Mount Holyoke College. But
maybe they just changed the name.
Yeah, maybe so. I'll call my alumni office and ask the question. But yeah, to your question about farming being interdisciplinary and the way that major sort of helped me. I don't know if it's so much that the major helped prepare me for farming so much as like both of them, suit me very, very well because they are both require so many different skill sets and so many different ways of looking at a problem. And also critical social thought specifically had my studies sort of ranging through a bunch of different departments at the college. So everything from like environmental studies to American history to literature to gender studies, kind of all over the map. And farming is similarly demanding in the sense that you wear a lot of different hats and you step in and out of a lot of different skill sets over the course of a day. So, for instance, I'm just thinking about today. I was, you're a mechanic 1 hour and the next hour you're in marketing because you have to text with a chef to try to sell the pea shoots that are growing out in the field, and you got to try to sell to an irrigation specialist dealing in like hydrology and kind of mechanics to basic plumbing and electrical work. It's and then not to mention the purely sort of personal relationships that I think most farmers really rely on to make their businesses successful. So for me anyway, my relationship with all of the apprentices that come through Quail Hill Farm are really important. So acting as sort of a mentor and a manager in that role and a teacher, those skills are very important to me. And, all of the, having been Scott Chasky's understudy for 7 years, all of those relationships that he has built over time and sort of stewarding those relationships. There are just so many skill sets that range from like the interpersonal to the really technical that really keep me wrapped. I find it's just fascinating and endlessly interesting.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Ira has joined us. Ira, can you hear us?
Hello. I can hear you.
Welcome back.
Hopefully. Yeah, it seems to be a little bit of a delay, but I got some good advice to try an alternate method. Thank you.
Okay, So because you've just joined us, could you just give us just a brief introduction to yourself and how you came to be at KK's farm and your background, which was another career before this?
Okay, so I'm an architect, and my wife KK is a builder. We did a lot of design build over the years, and we were so busy. We were looking for a getaway weekend, and I was working out here on the East End anyway as an architect. So we decided we should find a place for ourselves. I was going to come out and convert an old barn into a studio, art studio. I like to do stone sculpture and painting, and KK was going to relax. So we found this farm that is now KK's farm. It was abandoned for 5 years. Nobody wanted it. Buildings were falling down, but that was our business, so we didn't mind, and it was only going to be for weekends anyway. No idea about farming, no intention of farming. So KK had a local farmer, Bill Lindsay, clear the catbrier from the fields and planted wildflowers, and we were just going to watch the flowers. But then my son and daughter-in-law had their babies, our grandkids, and KK decided to learn how to grow good food for the babies. So she did a lot of studying, went to organic school, and one of the speakers was Steve Storch, a biodynamic grower from South Fork. Came home that night and said, "We're doing biodynamics. It's the best." So I focused. Then after growing biodynamically, my stomach and my taste buds convinced my brain it was a good idea. So then I started studying. And then not only did my family want the food, it was just to grow for the grandkids, but then of course the friends of the family, and then restaurants started desiring the food. North Fork Table and Inn was the first restaurant on the North Fork to go farm to table. And then it just kept growing, and I downsized my architecture firm, and KK stopped building, and now growing. Now I'm a farmer.
Excellent, thank you. So now I'm going to go back to the little loop I was making. Charity, could you explain exactly what kombucha is and what SCOBY is? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes,
SCOBY,
SCOBY.
which is an acronym for?
A symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast.
And what is kombucha and why is it considered good for people?
So kombucha is a fermented caffeinated tea, essentially. And the SCOBY is, if you haven't seen them before, they don't look very nice, for lack of better words. It just looks like a very large mushroom almost, and that's what you put in your sweetened caffeinated tea, and it ferments it. You ferment it. Everybody does it a little bit differently. Some people do it just one fermentation. I do it two. So it sits 1 week in the large vats, and then I bottle it, and it sits in bottles for a week before it's refrigerated. So it's considered a probiotic drink, and it has all the good bacteria you need for the bad bacteria that are inside of your digestive system and in your body. So basically it's like the good guys versus the bad guys inside of your body. And you know, it's become quite the craze over the last, I would say, 10 years. But like I said, there wasn't anything that really tasted that good. So now you can drink it and get the benefits and enjoy it while you drink it instead of having to plug your nose and suck it down.
It's not just some healthy, punishing kind of beverage. I mean, it's delicious. It's absolutely delicious. So Greg, let's go to, I want people to know here, if they remember this, everybody knows Tea Magazine in the New York Times, right? You started a column there called A Chef in the Field. Could you explain? Right?
Yeah. We were at Quail Hill Farm having lunch one day, and well, we were hungry, so we went in the field and we had collard greens and duck eggs, and we made this great meal. And we sort of just said, hey, like, no one knows where collard greens comes from. No one really eat stuck eggs. Why? That's what we have, and that's what we're eating. Why don't we tell people about where our food comes from? So I had been working with the New York Times, doing fashion photography and reportage. And we just called them up and they said, this sounds like a great idea. So for 3 years, I think it was every other week, or I can't remember exactly the frequency, but we would find a product that was fresh, that was growing in the field, and we would take the chef that I was working with at the time, Jeff Schwartz, who's now in Los Angeles, and we would find that fresh product, and then we would take it into the kitchen and make a dish and share the recipe, and we would document the whole process so someone could actually see what it looked like growing and then what they could actually do with it. So I mean, you'd be surprised, you know, people think their food comes in a clamshell, you know, a plastic container. No one knows that cauliflower is sort of grows in this sort of palm of a green plant, you know, just big leaves surrounding this beautiful white or purple vegetable. So it was really eye-opening for a lot of people, and people started using more of these products. I mean, I remember someone came to the farm with the recipe in their hand and said, I just read about Quail Hill garlic scapes. Can I get some? And big smile came on my face, and I just said, of course you can. So it was a really nice thing to do.
Excellent. Thank you. Layton, I'm quoting you now. You said once that farming is a trade like carpentry or plumbing, but everybody has a place in farming. No matter what your history or background, everyone has a connection to agriculture. Could you elaborate on that? Explain a little bit what you mean by that, because it's true.
Yeah. Well, there are a few like pieces of that I want to kind of pick apart, because I think that unlike certain other trades, that farming, especially organic farming, has sort of enjoyed a renaissance of sorts, and it's enjoyed like a fair amount of sort of like fame or valorization, when certain other types of trades, you could argue that like certain crafts have enjoyed the same kind of revival, but just wanted to point that out, that I think that there's that kind of difference in my experience with farming anyway, where I feel like people are way more interested in my career path as a farmer than I think they would have been if I had chosen to be, you know, perhaps an electrician, for example. And that's not a statement of judgment on any career path whatsoever, but just to say like, yeah, that farming as a job is very humbling and is very hard, and it's very sometimes it's very gratifying, but sometimes it's very frustrating. And the second part of recite the second half of the quote for me, Laura.
Hold on 1 second. Let me go back to that. Okay. Farming is a trade like carpentry or plumbing, but everybody has a place in farming. No matter what your history or background, everyone has a connection to agriculture. Yeah. I mean, I think basically everybody needs food.
Yeah, well, everybody needs food for sure. And also farming and agriculture has, you know, there is an agricultural culture and history to like every nation on the planet. You know, I think that all of us,
and it doesn't come from a clamshell.
It doesn't come from a clamshell, although a lot of really amazing farmers out there working the bottomlands in East Hampton Town, for sure. Shout out to them. But the point being that what I have enjoyed as a farmer is, as a young queer and trans person getting into agriculture, I felt very at home in that work. And I feel like that is a special magic to farming, whereby no matter what your background, we all have a place that we can find in farming. So that can come through so many directions. Again, like speaking back to the sort of interdisciplinary nature of farming, I feel like there's so many roads that lead to farming, be it chefs, be it people who, you know, really enjoy working in the outdoors. Maybe they did trail work for a while, be it people like me who came from the suburbs, but just like needed, you know, had an attention deficit issue and like needed to work on a very stimulating job. You know what I mean? Like there are just, there are so many roads that lead to food and agriculture and to feeding people. And, you know, I get as much out of the work as the work gives to other people. And I think that that's a really magical and special thing about farming and growing food.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ira, I have a question
Yes.
for you, which I ask many people, but it still requires explaining. Your farm is biodynamic. Could you explain what the practices are and what that means to be a biodynamic farmer?
Yes. Okay. So biodynamics is a little bit different than organic farming. It was started in 1924 by Rudolf Steiner when the farmers in Germany had a lot of problems after World War I. And it was originally intended to remediate the soil. But it's good for keeping soil fertility ongoing. It's basically a way to maintain fertility in the soil going on for years and years. There are four main parts. One is a calendar. We work by certain calendars called the biodynamic calendar. So every hour of every day is different, and sometimes they're good for working with root crops. Other times they're good for working with leaf crops, etc. And if you work on the recommended times, you get the best vitality, which means the best nutrition and therefore the best taste. Doesn't mean you can't. It's only a guide. It's only in the most optimum times. But the main thing about the calendar is that there are blackout times when you shouldn't plant or harvest. If you plant, you're going to get low germination. Nobody wants that. You do all the work and you get 50% germination. That's not good. And you're going to get misformed plants. You get gnarly radishes, things like that. If you harvest, the harvest won't store well. So that's kind of not a good thing to do. The next major component are these preparations. So like horn manure, horn silica. And then when we make compost, we put in chamomile, oak bark, stinging nettle, valerian, yarrow, dandelion. And all it does, all we're doing is making a great environment for the microbes. It's really the microbes that do all the work. They decompose organic matter into a form that the plants can take up to nutrition. And it's all about soil health. That's the third thing, is creating as much humus and soil fertility. So I'm really working for the soil health. That's really a major item. So biodynamics is a little bit different than organics. There's certain things in organics that you're allowed to do that we don't do, like putting copper out. Because copper kills the pests, but it also is harmful to microbes. Microbes are our friends. They create ongoing humus in the soil. That's about as short an explanation of biodynamics. It's really biodynamics, bio meaning life, and dynamic is force. So we get in touch with the life force, and that's of the plants. And it's so when you getting nutrition into your body, it's not just the physical substances. There are forces in those substances that are giving life to all of us. So that's what we pay attention to. And, you know, it's about observing on the farm, getting in touch with the farm and seeing what the farm needs. We do dowsing. We also do all good sense, common sense farming practices, companion planting, crop rotation, appropriate watering. We plant marigolds at the end of all of our tomato beds because they attract beneficial insects. Anything that's good, common sense, we do. So that's kind of the basics of biodynamics in a nutshell. It's obviously a little more complicated. We don't import any petrochemical substances at all. We have remedies for all problems. If you have fungus, you put out horsetail eclosedum as a remedy. If you have too many days of cold and rain, you put out silica spray, which enhances the warmth out in the fields. So, I mean, I can get into more detail, but I'm not sure how much time you want me to spend on this.
I appreciate it. I don't think we have a lot of time, and I definitely want to leave time for the audience to ask questions. But Charity, I just want to ask you, so you are very well traveled and you teach dance and you've done kickboxing and you do the system called the bars, which is probably too hard to explain to people right now. So how do you go from, and yoga teaching and all of that, which is so good for everybody, probably especially right now, but how do you go from that to becoming an entrepreneur selling your kombucha? It's got to be a big change.
It is a change, but it's also, it is similar in some ways. Because when I'm teaching movement, or even when I'm promoting my dance or yoga classes, it's still something you have to get people to buy. You have to sell them a service. And like I said at the beginning in my introduction, there was a shift between going from a service to a product. A lot of it came down to the business side of it. I guess when I was doing, well, I do both still a lot, but with this, it's like you have to do more projections and business planning, and a lot of that I asked people. I went to a lot of different advisors. I went to people who've had businesses or have businesses. I talked to a lot of different people. So that's what really helped me to sort of shift gears, is talk to people who have experience with this kind of stuff. And it's still, you know, every time I go into the kitchen, it is kind of putting on this other hat. Like, I love creating the flavors, but now that I've created these top 3 flavors, it's kind of doing the same thing. Whereas when I'm teaching a dance class, it's never the same. It's always changing. So I'm looking at creating more flavors, but there's the side of me that's like, okay, let's just focus. So I guess there's still work I have to do as far as being the entrepreneur, as a beverage entrepreneur versus the movement side of me. But they do kind of go hand in hand, because you're basically marketing the same people. You're marketing people, if they're into health conscious activities, they're probably looking for health conscious drinks and foods. So you're kind of working with the same people again and again, is what I've noticed, especially more in the last couple months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like, Yvette, should we open it up for questions now? Because we've been going for 40 minutes now, or close.
Sure.
I see questions.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one thing, and for Layton, Greg, and Ira, they could talk to this, which is, how has this cool rainy season, has it been in terms of what you're generally experiencing, very cool and rainy in the early part of the season? What kind of impact is that having on what you're growing now in the fields?
Layton, do you want to start? I can start.
I'll start. Thanks, Ira. Well, we're on the South Fork, you know, we're in Amagansett. We're maybe a mile and a half from the ocean to the south. We got Napeague Harbor, another mile to the east. And then, you know, Peconic Bay is north of us, couple miles. So we're basically surrounded by water on 3 sides. And so like the cold, somewhat wet spring is not unfamiliar to us.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is that this year we had we hit a sweet spot in like late March, where we were able to, actually mid-March, where we were able to start plowing pretty early. So in the springtime, really the window that you're looking for is less like a temperature shift and more so like a dry spell where you can get into the fields and you can plow without doing damage to the soil. So that window came a little bit early for us. So we like kind of ran at it. And so we've been planting in the fields for almost 2 months now. And, you know, we are like some of the baby spinach and some of the radishes are like just about there. And like the bok choy looks like it's doing okay, but there are a lot of other crops that we put in the field, you know, a month ago that look like they've barely moved. So we've lost very few crops, like, you know, knock on wood, because we actually got a light frost last night, a month later than the average last freeze date is in this zone. But yeah, it's affecting things in a big way, because you can manipulate soil temperatures and air temperatures somewhat with use of different kinds of mulches. So on our farm, we use a biodegradable, it's like a corn-based plastic, basically, that is biodegradable. And then we also use floating row cover that creates a sort of microclimate for the plants. And that'll, you know, on a really cold night, that'll keep things from dying. And also will help things germinate a little bit faster, some of the direct seeded crops. But for the most part, you know, we're probably gonna have to push back our CSA start date. We were gunning for Memorial Day weekend, but probably gonna push it back a week. And yeah, so not totally unusual to have this kind of weather, but the unusual bit was having the window and planting through, you know, basically a month ahead of schedule. And most of those crops have just been hanging out. They're out to lunch until this weekend. It's supposed to be 67 in Amagansett tomorrow. So,
hey, Yvette, can I throw one of my own questions in for everybody, even though I see more questions lined up from our wonderful audience? Considering the current situation, I'll just call it a situation, restaurants are kind of screwed right now, but doing takeout. And that's kind of has been my business in the past. So my heart breaks for every restaurant around the world. But out here, local farmers have really started producing more. Ira, I understand that your custom CSAs have doubled.
Yes.
Layton, you probably have more requests for CSAs. Greg, you're probably farming harder, producing more stuff and have more people interested. Charity, it's possible that more people want this healthy drink from you. So the question is for everybody, how has this changed possibly how you're farming and selling right now?
Well, if you want, I'll start. The restaurants are not doing sit down, of course, but I have a few restaurants still ordering for takeout. But my CSA doubled in the last month, number of people. So doubled. And we've modified the system, so it's an all outdoor drive-through pickup, and everybody pays by PayPal. So it's kind of a cleaner, different operation. We've been cutting out of our greenhouses every 10 days, just about. We have 4 greenhouses. The weather's been perfect for indoor crops. As Layton said, we're maybe 2 or 3 weeks behind on the outdoor crops. I think on the North Fork, we're probably a little warmer than the South Fork this time of year, but not appreciably much. But we're better than last year, because last year, March and April were terrible. And a lot of those early crops that we planted, actually, when they started growing, didn't become a mature crop. They just went to seed, like the last dying breath of a plant wants to set seed. So we had to replant a number of beds, and we're just looks like we're gotten by that. Although plants were slow in growing, they now seem to be coming to fruition. But the peas, you know, to put peas in on St. Patty's Day, they were sitting there for weeks. So now they're finally coming up. But well behind, 2 or 3 weeks behind schedule, I would say.
Who else wants to pipe up with how things have changed?
I'll say for me, I've shifted my focus more on door to door with consumer, where I never really looked at that option before, because it was always going you know, to provisions or wherever I was going to be selling it. And now consumers want to order straight from me or straight from East End Food Institute, which they're providing a delivery service now. So that's a big shift for me. And that's something where I have to be, you know, shifting my website around and figuring out the whole e-commerce side of things and selling off of Instagram. So these are things that take a little more time to kind of figure out at the beginning, but I think it's something that can continue even as the situation starts to get better, that sales can go both ways. You know, they can keep going to the sellers, and then they can keep going through me and, you know, a consumer straight from me. So I think it's kind of working all right for me.
Good. Now, should we get back to the audience questions?
Well, maybe Layton or Greg, you want to talk about your
Oh yeah, sorry.
how your product and how the CSA is going, and Greg, how your product distribution is going?
Yeah, I can go quickly. So for people watching who aren't familiar, with Quail Hill Farm, we're predominantly a CSA model, and this is our 31st year of growing for a CSA. And our model is pretty unique in this, is highly unique in the sense that our members come to the farm twice a week and harvest their own produce out of the fields. And that has been the method for, you know, for a full generation or so, however you measure a generation, for 31 years. And so we were really challenged this spring to really think through how to address all of the really profound and present public health concerns that come with the Pick Your Own CSA. But, you know, trying to keep the core spirit of the community farm intact while also putting into place health and safety measures that would keep everybody safe. So, you know, it's really changed. It's given us the opportunity to add a lot more structure to the way that the CSA works. So the basics of those being like, you know, creating scheduling formats for allowing our CSA members to sign up for when they are going to come pick. So basically traffic control, sanitizing, and having staff available to basically supervise the comings and goings of the members and making sure that people are wearing proper PPE and observing social distancing and all of the like. So I feel very grateful to have that, to still have that, because I feel like, you know, when you're a farm that's built around that kind of a model, if we were to shift all of those CSA shares into a box pickup, that would just have added a lot of stressors onto our production system. We have 7 staff, I think, for 35 acres. So that would have really changed the math on that quite a bit. And yeah, our restaurant partners are certainly struggling. We have a handful of folks who are ordering really consistently. But I also see this as an opportunity. It's not like the need for the food is not there. So in some ways, it's allowed for opportunities for us to look at organizations who are doing food distributions, basically just to alleviate hunger in our communities. So we're taking a close look at those opportunities, and I feel really grateful for that too.
Is somebody typing while we're talking? Ira?
Yes, I was answering
Can
her
hear
question.
you.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop.
Right.
So for us, just quickly, you know, we're a value-added farm, and most of our crops come to full maturity towards the end of the season. So we are selling product that we made with our 2019 crop. So our inventory, you know, it's been interesting. We've only been in the game. We started in 2017, started selling Hotsauce in 2018 and 19. So we're still trying to figure out our place. when COVID hit, we lost a really big order from a brick and mortar shop that we had been working on for those 2 years, and they finally ordered from us, and then we lost. I wouldn't say we lost the account, but they didn't order because they weren't having any foot traffic. So we were fortunate enough to have some vendors that stood by us. And because so many people came out here from the city, they were able to move more of our product than we were expecting. So we have been moving product, not as quickly as we wanted to, but we're very happy and thankful that we have people that are supporting us locally, both the customers that are here and the vendors that are selling our things. We've also had people that haven't been able to get out here that have found us last season or found us through a variety of channels, and our mail order business has actually gone up a little bit. So that's nice. We're positive and negative there. So we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, I definitely don't want anyone to be suffering from anything, but if they can stay home safely and order our goods online, I'm happy to fill that gap of them not leaving the house. In terms of restaurants, again, our product comes in later. So our fresh peppers and the hops and the indigo even, that all comes later. So hopefully restaurants will be back, and hopefully a bigger lesson will be learned that there is a lot of product available in New York State, whether it be Northern New York, Eastern New York, or Western New York, that restaurants and wholesale chain distributors or wholesale distributors don't have to go to California for whatever it may be, whether it be spinach or romaine lettuce or peppers. Avocados you'll still have to get somewhere else, but we're here, and hopefully we'll get a little bump from that, just as the CSAs have been recognized for having really good food, if not the best food and the freshest food, minutes, just as close as the supermarket. We'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So Laura, do you want me to find another question from the audience? Or
Sure. I see that Kathy Kennedy planted a lot of questions. I actually can I just ask one quick one?
Yeah.
Because I'm really into hot sauces, and Layton is the pepper whisperer and Greg is making hot sauce. Greg, how high on the Scoville scale do your hot sauces go?
I've never measured the blends. We have one very, very, very hot product, and that is a single pepper. I have it right here. It's a little fireball pepper. Can y'all see that? It's
in the jar.
It's in a jar. It's a rare pepper from Peru called a charapita pepper. And it's a seasoning pepper, really. So a lot of Peruvians grow it outside their house, and they pop a couple of berries off and throw it in a sauce. So we have ours in vinegar, so it's preserved. So you can use this pepper as a seasoning pepper, or you can pop it in your mouth and get rid of anything you've ever tasted. But we do grow the Reaper pepper. We grow Trinidad scorpion peppers, and we're growing those for particular people who want really hot things for their restaurants. And
is that Jason and Jeremy?
No, Joe Remuto, Town Line Barbecue. He has a wing challenge that we're supplying some of the peppers for, and and people love hot. But our hot
Yes.
sauce is the sort of, our philosophy is we want you to taste the sauce. We want you to taste the peppers. We don't want to burn your mouth. We want to complement whatever you're eating. So,
Right.
you know, everything is sort of a slow burn. So you can kind of taste the food and then the hot sauce complements. It's like a tapenade. It's a condiment. It's not the star. It's not the trophy. It's just an accentuation.
And it's kind of layered with the flavors.
Exactly. Yeah. And we use rare peppers, so it's a distinct flavor, and they're pretty nice. So you have to try it.
Okay, so I'm just going to follow up on Greg. Somebody, Ellen asked the question, do you eat indigo or is it just as a dye? So you said you were growing indigo. So.
Yeah. So you can eat indigo. It's an edible plant. There are some chefs. You mentioned Jack Formica earlier. He actually picked up some indigo from us the other day just to experiment on using the powder. I don't know what it tastes like. I've never eaten it, but you can eat naturally grown, hopefully organically grown indigo, because the process itself, you know, you grow indigo as a plant. It's part of the buckwheat family. Then you harvest it and you ferment the leaves, and the leaves produce this endoxin, and then the endoxin has to drop, and then you have to separate the dye, the paste itself, from the liquid that it was fermenting in. And then from there, you can keep it as a paste, or what we do is we strain it through a piece of silk, and then it dries down into bricks in a powder. So I think chefs have been using it for a powder, but again, I don't know. I just love the plant. I mean, that's the truth of it. I love the color blue. I love growing it. I'm not a big dyer. I just, with my fashion background, I thought it would be cool, and it got a little traction, and I really just love the plant and love growing it. And the process is pretty fascinating. So kind of like Ira, I didn't have much of a farming background, and every day you're just sort of learning all of these things, and it's pretty incredible. It's very humbling, and it's actually pretty exciting. So, you know, we're just figuring things out as we go along.
You know, going off of so Ira, you normally have a dandelion festival this year at this time, around this time of year. Maybe just talk about dandelions with your farm, like.
Yes, typically first, second week in May, we have dandelion festivals at the farm. And for me, the important part is educational, but we do have live bands playing in the pasture. We have 20 products made out of dandelion, the root, leaf, flower. We had dandelion wine made by Macari Vineyard. Matchbook Distillery made an after dinner drink with dandelion. So we had a lot of interest in that, and we have a lot of things for kids, flower crowns, face painting, and such. But the main thing is these lectures, and in my big barn, some of them are biodynamic lecturers and people who know a lot about dandelions. But it's to encourage people to give up the harmful chemicals that they put on the lawns, the fields, that try to eradicate the dandelion. And it's really the messenger from heaven. You know, it's one of the first flowers that comes out in the spring. It's great for the bees, and we should cherish it. It's a great tonic after the winter, health. A lot of people love the dandelion. We actually plant dandelions in our greenhouses to grow over the winter. We plant them in our raised beds, and we have people who just want them to eat. And of course, we have a couple different varieties. We have the straight Italian leaf, and there are many, many others. But it's really to encourage people to stop using harmful chemicals. And that's really the message, the whole message about the Dandelion Festival. And I'd love to encourage everybody, the wineries, the sod farms, you know, the private people, homeowners, stop using harmful chemicals. We only have a single source aquifer here on Long Island. And whatever you put on the ground winds up in the water. And then it goes into the bays, the creeks, the estuaries. We're already ruining our shellfish life. And there are places on Long Island you can't drink the water. So it should be, there's one place in Cutchogue where the elementary school can't drink the water because of, if they're on a well, not Suffolk County. And you know, these are farmers' grandkids and kids. You think the message would get across. As long as I'm on the subject, I would love to encourage the Peconic Land Trust to have as a goal to have covenants with any one of their projects, their deals, that they do not, whoever's involved in the project cannot use harmful chemicals. Maybe it'll be a little difficult to enact, but at least as a goal, we should encourage getting rid of these harmful chemicals. Too many to list. So that's my goal with the Dandelion Festival, encouraging people not to use harmful chemicals. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Ira.
That's a great goal. Great goal.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I want to say
Thank
that,
you.
you know, as a land trust, you know, we support our local farmers across the board. And so I know Ira has an important message, and we're looking at, and we do offer many programs on a sustainable lawn and landscaping and farming programs. But the good message is know your farmer, get to know your farmer and what they do, how they grow, support our local farmers as much as you can. And we're all looking for a healthy and safe environment. So, which is great, but thanks. And Laura, did you have another question you wanted to throw out there? Or?
Oh, I have hundreds, but I was actually just reading through, oh, now I lost it. Some of other people's questions. And one of them was, oh, there's a story from NPR. Okay. So one of the questions is anything being done to increase diversity in the farm community? Latinos elsewhere are such an essential part of putting food on our tables, certainly including wine and their expertise in tending the vines. With so many Latinos on both forks, why are we not seeing their presence in this field here? Actually, I would disagree with a little bit of that. I see a lot of Latinos who actually own their own businesses with landscaping. But as far as owning farms or leasing farms or grape growing, that's a very good question. So I don't know who can answer that.
I don't know, right?
You got to pin it on someone, Laura.
What?
You got to pin it on someone.
Who wants to take it? Ira, Layton, Greg.
Well, it's a really big question. You know, this is it's a whole societal question. It's not just about the farming. You could say the same thing about any industry and aspect of American life. You know, this country was started on genocide and slavery, so we got to work to a better situation. And people, all minorities are, you know, working and showing better throughout the ages, but still it's so many obstacles against equality. It may not look like it, but I'm a minority too. I mean, Jewish, architect, farmer, and not too many of those. And I've experienced, you know, anti-Semitism in my life, but it's nowhere near what's happening when you talk about genocide and slavery. So there are people coming up. They just need a chance. That's what I do with, we started a children's foundation. It's called Fiber Foundation. Myself and some of my colleagues are mostly minority kids, and they have a 10-year commitment. and we stay with them. We have a mentor for each kid, and we help tutor them through SATs and college entrance. And all we're doing is giving them an opportunity to make positive life choices. So I think everybody can pitch in their own way to help the situation. But it's evolving, and it's a societal situation. It's all of us.
Very true. Okay, Yvette, back to you in the.
I'd like to add one thing about
I'm sorry, Layton, go ahead.
I just want to add my 2 cents to that question, which is that I have farmed and lived in a bunch of different places in this country, and this is definitely probably a mechanism of how seasonal, or how our economy is tied to the seasonal nature of our work, and especially for farmers, like when you can capture the most people who are going to the farmers market and go to the restaurants and coming to your CSA, which is Memorial Day to Labor Day. And I would just say that a function of living in a really seasonal place is that there is a really high premium put on the produce that is sold on farms here. That is not common in other parts of the country. And I would also say that, like, when you're looking at issues of racial equity and economic disparities and who's shopping at your farmer's market and who's joining your CSA, really, like, looking hard. A lot of farms would benefit from, like, looking hard at their barriers to entry for who's able to purchase their product, who has the time to go pick up the CSA, who's shopping at a farmer's market, what farmer's markets accept SNAP and EBT benefits. And I think that there's just, like, a lot that we can do as local farmers to look at those issues and diversify our marketing streams to include like the panoply of people that are living, that are sharing in our community with us, other than asking the question, like, why aren't there more people of color in our CSA communities? You know what I mean? So I think that there's a little bit of legwork that can be done on our part. And I want to thank the person who asked that question, Carla, I think.
Yes, exactly. And also, Layton, if I remember correctly, you became part of something called Seeding Partner, Seeding Power Fellowship.
Yep.
And you represent all of Long Island and helping, you know, evening out the availability for all people of all races, colors, everything.
Yeah.
You know, for food availability, you know, from farms. It's not just, you know, your fancy CSA from a Hamptons farm. It should be accessible to everybody. And you've been a part of that since last year, right? Representing Long Island.
Yep, it's been about a year. And the, like, quick blurb about the fellowship, it's called the Seeding Power Fellowship. Anyone can go and look it up, but feel extremely lucky to be a part of the inaugural cohort for Seeding Power, which is basically taking leaders in the nonprofit food systems work from the Hudson Valley, New York City, and Long Island together to start to organize and start to work together towards creating a more equitable and just food system. So the pivot point with the fellowship is that we have people working in many different sectors of the food system. So public health, farmers markets, education, food production, you know, youth development, and getting us all in the room basically to start to talk about the same issues that we're all sort of struggling with, and think about it from a systemic perspective rather than keeping us siloed, right? And so it's been incredibly rewarding. And yeah, it's been very valuable for my work at Quail Hill and at the Trust.
So Laura, we're about at 10 past, so I think maybe we should start to wrap up. I don't know.
Okay, so then I guess we're gonna wrap it up. So no more questions, right? No more audience or planted questions. Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for what they're doing. I say this every time when I moderate a panel. You guys are rock stars. Every farmer, fisherman, entrepreneur, anybody who's helping us in our community, Peconic Land Trust, everything. And I thought maybe charity, because you specialize in movement and dance and yoga. Do you have any advice or final words for us to help us through this, like an exercise or a suggestion?
A physical movement.
Because I know I've gained about 10 pounds. I gained the COVID-19.
There's so many that you could do. I guess a big one that I do in a lot of my classes, whether it's dance or yoga, it's a Qigong movement actually. And you stand, I'll see if I can do it in my kitchen here. You stand and you basically just start to move and twist your body. And as you're moving and twisting, you're tapping your front shoulder head and then your kidney point in the back. So you're hitting meridian points. So what this does is you're releasing any toxins within your spine. That's where the toxins like to sit in your body. And then when you tap these meridian points, these are like our happy meridian points. So it releases endorphins into the body to create a more happy, joyful being that you can live in. So it's probably one of my favorite ones to teach, and I do it all the time, and it doesn't matter any size, age, race, sex. Anybody can do it. You can do it slow, you can do it fast, and it wakes you up. It gets things moving. It brings a smile on your face. You can do it to music. You can sing while you do it. So that's my recommendation, is your body does like to move. And it's been an honor to be on here with farmers. I feel like I'm just like an entrepreneur farmer. I've been gardening my whole life, and I got the privilege of taking care of Dale and Betty's organic farm this last winter, and they're still gone. So I started planting in their greenhouses, and it's just me and a 7-year-old who lives next door, and we're doing pretty good. We're growing quite a bit, and I've already harvested a bunch of greens. So, it's an honor to hear the background of the farmers on the panel here, and I'm just honored to be part of it. So I hope you can take that little nugget of joyful movement with you into your day, into your night, into your weekend, and remember your body does like to move, and it does like to have, good stuff going into it. As you're sitting at home or quarantining or in the fields, like, pick that green, have a little snack, keep the vibes up.
Thank you. Okay, Yvette, you're in charge.
Okay, well, I'm just going to do the final thank you. So thank you, Laura, Layton, Charity Joy, Greg, and Ira for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And to everybody out there in the audience, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for paying attention and joining us. And we hope you'll join us again. We don't have another Long Island Grown yet, but we're planning for more. So we'll keep you posted on new ones that are coming up. But just to ask you to save the date, actually, for Saturday, June 6th, we're going to do another Zoom talk. It's just going to be a conversation between our president, John B.H. Halsey, and poet farmer and Layton. I'm going to say Layton's mentor, and I don't think that they'll disagree, Scott Chasky. So we're looking forward to that conversation, and time to be determined. But so keep watching your email, and we'll be sending you information. And thank you guys for this. This was great. It's fantastic to hear different perspectives and points of view, and we really appreciate keeping the conversation going. So everybody be safe, be healthy. Support your local farms and your local producers, and try to enjoy some sunshine over this beautiful upcoming weekend. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.